Fractal's launching new Meshify cases, the Meshify 3. We got the Meshify 3 and the XL. Fractal's done a couple of things that have surprised me, including an RGB controller that I don't hate. And it's for very special reasons. You'll be surprised. Let's take a closer look, because nobody else is going to comment on this part of it. I like the XL because you can put XL things in it like Threadripper. But we're going to do a build first with the 9950X in the Meshify 3. Probably going to do a build with this one in another later video. If you follow this channel, you know that we do crazy workstation builds. We could put AMD Epic in this. We could put a Xeon in this, a Xeon server workstation. You never know. I do actually have the new Xeon workstation CPU. That might be a good, well, we'll see. We'll see. But first, let's do this one. So both of these cases have a lot of quality of life improvements. Fractal is really learning about their audience and how things work and so on and so forth, including you can have a glass side panel or you can have a solid side panel, because some of you out there are very militantly solid side panel. And if you don't like RGB, don't worry, you can disable that. I'll show you how. This case comes with 3 new design fans from Fractal. They're all mounted at the front. And this case is specially designed for double flow-through GPUs, or GPUs that have flow-through at one end of the card, because it's got basically a ram scoop on the front here, which is going to direct air upwards, which is great. It turns out it works fantastic. You can squeeze through release plastic brackets, which will help you hold in your wires. Now, the advantage of this over Velcro is that it doesn't give. And so when you're cramming a bunch of wires back here, you know that if you use Velcro, sometimes it's just a little too much. It sticks out a little too much. But because this is hard plastic and it ratchets in, you can be sure that your cables will stay out of the way. But you know the side panels on Fractal cases, they pop in and out. They got the little pins at the top that pop in. They've added locking holes. Now the Torrent Compact and the Fractal Torrent had locking holes on the top for the sides that would sort of hold it in the middle. They moved it to the back because who wants to take off the top in order to unlock the sides? I mean, really? Come on. They've also kept the pull tail that we first saw on the Fractal North. This is a nice fabric pull tail as opposed to the leather version on the North. Now the North is a little bit more premium, a little bit higher end case. This one is meant to be more affordable. It is plastic reinforced mesh on the top. So again, those of you that have cats or things that want to climb on top of your computer and it would sort of push down on the mesh, Fractal has learned and it's reinforced. Now perhaps because of our videos or because of lessons learned in other builds, the top has captured thumb screws. So the removable top makes it so much easier to build in this case because you can mount your motherboard and then it's very easy to connect to your power lines and everything else. On older cases where the top is riveted in, not just from Fractal, from anybody, it can be a little difficult to get to the cables there. Some people install the cables and then like try to pilot their motherboard in, but it's a little easier to scratch your motherboard because you have to handle it a weird way and then it might scrape across the standoff. But yeah, a lot of flexibility here. There's 7 slots at the rear, and so this is designed for normal full-size ATX motherboards and not super deep ATX motherboards. You can remove this cable shroud to give yourself a little bit more room, but officially, the motherboard compatibility is eATX up to 277 millimeters, ATX, Micro ATX, and Mini ITX. It's designed for an ATX style power supply. You can use a smaller power supply with an adapter bracket, such as those that come with our Cooler Master SFX power supplies. The front fan area can also hold up to a 360 millimeter radiator. You can use a 120 millimeter rear radiator on the 120 millimeter fan mount, and the top will support up to a 280 millimeter. The maximum PSU length is 180 millimeters. The GPU maximum length is 349 millimeters when you're using just the fans at the front, and the CPU cooler maximum height is 174 millimeters. The overall case dimensions are 423 by 229 by 507 millimeters, and it's 4 2.5 inch bays or 2 3.5 inch bays. It also has 2 dedicated 2.5 inch, and 2 of those are dedicated 2.5 inch drive positions. If you are thinking about doing a build with this case, even before you buy it, you can go download the manual. And the manual, the PDF manual from Fractal, no matter which case you're considering, always has a lot of really good build and layout ideas. So you don't have to wonder, it's like, will this work? How much room do I have? I'm gonna use an extra thick 360 millimeter radiator. What options do I have for that? There's manual options for that because they cover all the different permutations and combinations in the manual for the most part. Now the drive mounting brackets are movable. So you could move it from one side to the other, and then you go from 3.5 inch to 2.5 inch. So in this configuration, you could put two mechanical 3.5 inch drives here, or some sort of unholy cast off enterprise flash drive, or you can unscrew this bracket and move it over, and then this is a 2.5 inch mounting position. Same with this standoff and this screw hole. You can use that cleverly, effectively, to have two 2.5 inch mounting positions here. And each 2.5 inch mounting position will hold up to two 2.5 inch drives or a single 3.5 inch drive. On the bottom here, you've also got mounting holes if you want to put something there. But anything that you put in this area is going to get in the way of that ram scoop, which I don't care for. I like the ram scoop, so I'm saying don't use the mounting holes on the bottom for this case. Instead of a rear removable dust filter, as in the past, Fractal switched to a side removable dust filter for the power supply. I could get behind that. And it's got a little handle right in the foot to help you remove it. Now, one thing we have to talk about is the fan situation, because these are new fans. They have different airflow and noise characteristics than previous Fractal fans, but these are single cable fans that are also RGB in the ring. And so it looks like a USB-C connection, but it's not. And that combines both the PWM and RGB. Fortunately, the accessory box for our Meshify 3 RGB comes with an adapter cable to go from the proprietary connection on these fans to a standard connection, but be aware of that. Now, the fans connect directly to the fan hub, and the fan hub is controllable, and the fan hub is very interesting. It's a platform agnostic software solution, yes. Yeah, it's actually really exciting. We'll talk more about that in a second. But the fans are designed to plug directly into the fan hub, and then the fan hub can control, it's programmable, basically. And so that is what they intend for you to use with the Fractal native fans. If you don't want to do that, and you don't want to use the fan hub, you can use the included adapter cable, and that's great. And I think this is a great accessory, because we've seen other case manufacturers do this, but then you're sort of in their ecosystem for fans. With the adapter, not so. Fractal's sort of giving you the best of both worlds here. And I really like the cleverness of the fan hub, and I'll explain why in a minute. I predicted this. I didn't predict this. I wished for it. I wished it into existence. So this is great. So what sort of a build are we going to do with this? We're going to do an AM5 9950X3D. For that, we're going to use our B850 live mixer Wi-Fi from ASRock because, well, I've got two expansion slots at the bottom. This is also a pretty good aesthetic. For this case. Although I do wish it had 5 gigabit LAN as opposed to 2.5 gig. You can get a similar motherboard with the 5 gig LAN from ASRock, but I didn't have that one on hand, so we'll just use this one. This is a full-size ATX motherboard. It's got a pretty smart layout. It's not overly huge. It has one Gen 5 M.2 and two Gen 4 M.2 through the chipset. It's got 4 DDR5 DIMM slots that'll run a DDR5 6000. We might try 256 gigs in this platform in another video, but it's a little tricky to get that working at full speed. You really, for that kind of a thing, you really have to trade up to the more expensive, like the X870E or X870 motherboards in order to do that. The ones that have some extra special software sauce in order to support 256 gigs. Otherwise, it's going to be running relatively slow. I also really like the amount of rear I/O that I have with this motherboard. Although 8 of our USB ports are USB 2, which 4 USB 2 is probably about the right number, but I'll take it. We've also got the Lightning ports and the USB, plenty of 10 gigabit, super speed 10 gigabit power. You can upgrade to the more expensive version of this board and get USB 4. It's an option. All this talk about board features has got me second guessing my choice. I think the Live Mixer is a good value. It's the best bang for the buck. Now, even though ASRock sent me this board, I think this is the board that I would probably choose based on cost and features and everything else. I did consider also the X870E Nova, because it also has 2 PCIe slots, although one of them is PCIe 3x1. It's got 5 gigabit LAN, and it also has dual USB 4 Type-C, which is Thunderbolt compatible. It's got a lot more M.2 slots, which I don't really care about that. It's Wi-Fi 7. It's just a higher end board. It's X870E. I also considered the Aorus Master, also X870E. Now, the Aorus Master, so the thing with the X870E motherboards is that they're flagship boards. ASRock, MSI, Gigabyte, and Asus all have sort of flagship launch boards. And those boards generally have the most BIOS updates, they have the most features. They're the first boards that come when AMD launches a new CPU. And so those always get a special place. And it weighs heavily considering that kind of a motherboard for the build. It's like, I really should use one of the boards that's a launch board. And this is a X870E Ors Master is one of those launch boards. And it has 2 physical X16 slots that are, 4 lanes. Although one of them is PCIe 3. It's 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 3, which, it's fine. 5 gigabit, tons of USB. So, I mean, it's an option. But these boards are a lot more expensive. And this one gets the job done. Now for CPUs and cooling, those came from Micro Center, don't worry. And our Noctua NHD 15 Chromax Black is $129 at the local Micro Center. It was actually on sale for $99, $30 off. So couldn't pass that up. And it's a big giant cooler. And I want to see if a big giant cooler is going to fit fine with the clearance. I mean, yeah, I could look at the clearance millimeters, but what fun would that be? Also, I got the black version with a white case. What sort of madman is this? Trust me, it's fine. When you're putting the machine together, try not to touch the gold parts. That's the bottom of the CPU, the edge of the memory, the edge of the PCIe expansion cards. It's just good advice. Ooh, AMD switched to a different kind of plastic in their packing. Interesting. So this thing, you gotta unscrew some stuff to mount it to doesn't use the native AM5 mounting plastic. I love that Noctua clearly labels, these are AMD parts, use those. The AM5 mounting option, there is an offset option, so you can slide the heatsink around a little bit to get better coverage, a little bit better cooling on your AM5 CPU. That's a nice feature. Now before we actually mount the CPU cooler, the tower, I'm gonna install the memory. It's often easier to install the memory before you do this. We're gonna be using G.Skill, Trident Z. It's a CL28 memory and DDR5 6000 natively. If you're thinking about doing a build like this, I would strongly encourage you to consider 48 gigs of memory, 224 gig DIMMs, or 232 gig DIMMs for 64 gigs, or even 96 gigs. More memory will just make your computer feel overall snappier. And with an X3D processor, it's more forgiving of higher CAS latency memory. So I'm probably going to switch this memory after the video and I do some testing and benchmarking because I need a baseline reference. Probably going to switch it to some CL30 48 gig DIMMs to take the system total up to 96 gigs because, well, I mean, this is a 16 core system after all. I'm probably going to be doing a lot of stuff with it. Bunch of stuff I'm never going to be able to get back in that box. This is the dual fan version of the Chromax. This also comes with thermal paste, which is nice. It's another thing you don't have to buy. And also your mounting wires for the fan. I'm using the very slightly modified pea-sized dot that's optimized for the layout that's on this CPU. And that's pretty much what we need to mount this. Lettering side up. Although you do have to take out the middle fan in order to be able to get to the screws. There you go. There's the mounting screws there. Woo! Now we got our motherboard mounted. Another nice little detail is all the screws that come with this are silver. It's a nice touch. For the power supply, we're going to be using our brick-like Vita GM 1000 watt. This is from FSP. FSP is better known for server power supplies, but I like these for high-end and workstation builds. And really, I wanted to use this with a Threadripper build or something like that. But if I'm gonna, put a 5090 in here at 600 watts, the absolute minimum that I would go is 850 watts. I think 1000 watts is a better future-proof. It's a little easier on the power supply. And so I'm gonna use the 1000 watt power supply in this build because it's pretty affordable and, it's Cybernetics Gold, A-. It's fully modular power supply. It is PCIe 5.1 ready, so I can use the new NVIDIA style power connector. Just see how that goes. Mounting it at the back couldn't be easier. Fractal has changed their mount. It had been years since Fractal changed their power supply mounts. This is the same idea. This is reversible, so you could put your power supply upside down or right side up. I usually like to turn my power supply so it's pulling air in from the bottom. But if for some reason you want to run it differently, you can. I have a bunch of these FSP power supplies around the office, and I've been really happy with them. So there's a 12V2 2x6, 2 PCIe connections, 2 CPU connections, the standard motherboard connection, and then 3 peripheral connections in terms of connections on the power supply. And then the breakout cables give you 1 or 2 connections depending on if we're talking about PCIe peripherals or VGA or whatever. So it's pretty awesome. It's a pretty awesome combination of connectors. Also in the box with the FSP Group power supply, of course, is a power supply cable, some Velcro ties, and a ATX test plug. The ATX test plug is useful if you're water cooling because you can turn the power supply on without it being connected to a motherboard, which is great because If you have to flush your loop or something like that, you don't want to do that while the computer's on, and having that little adapter means you can hook your pump up to a power supply like this and run it directly, or, as I usually do, use this with a crappy old power supply when you're doing loop maintenance. But Meshify 3 XL is going to be our loop maintenance option, because there's lots of cool water cooling options for that, whereas custom looping this, you could do it, but there's a lot of nice quality of life features in the Meshify 3 XL that make it maybe a better choice for water cooling. Now, storage. What's the optimal storage solution? Optane, because it's optimal. It's also OP. Wow, that's way too many OP related puns. I'm also putting it in the outside most mounting position. It just barely fits. I can actually use a 1 millimeter heat transfer pad, thermal contact material, and use the metal side of the case as a heat sink for the Optane, which is great because they do tend to run a little warm. I'm going to try it without it because I'm sort of curious what the airflow is behind the motherboard in the default configuration. But my long-term plan is to just use some thermal pads and connect it to the metal side of the case to help keep the Optane cool, because, that's nice. Yes, you can use Optane on AM5. It's just an NVMe storage device. There's all kinds of different configurations. This particular one is a 1.6 terabyte P5800X. It is a PCIe Gen 4, it's not 5, but it is low latency. It is still the lowest latency storage device you can get, and that QDepth 1 for 4K sector sizes is still pretty much unbeaten by modern solutions. If I were going to put a flash device in this, I'd probably go for the Crucial T705. Those are in really short supply right now, though. Crucial T705 has excellent performance, and a lot of PCIe Gen 5 solutions are improving their latency all the time, but nothing beats this storage medium. It's kind of sucks that Optane died. But this is basically ready to turn on. Let me clean my desk off here and change the camera batteries. And let's see what happens. Now, you might have noticed that I haven't added a GPU yet. Don't worry, we're going to add a GPU. We'll see how it looks in a couple different configurations. But because this is a fresh out-of-the-box motherboard and a fresh build, and our 9950X3D has a built-in graphics solution, it should post in this configuration. We should be able to plug our monitor into the rear HDMI port and do the initial configuration of the system. Not necessarily the operating system installation or anything like that, but just update the BIOS and make sure that the system is working as it should before we add a GPU. And look, the very first thing I'm doing is updating the BIOS, which is what you should do, no matter what you're building. That's the fancy RGB. And we can see the diagnostic lights on our motherboard going through the sequence to let us know that it's working, and it's testing the memory, it's doing the training. Depending on how much memory you have and some other factors, it could take 5 or 6 minutes from the first time you turn on your machine before you actually get something on the screen. And we can see, even though I just got this motherboard, the BIOS was fairly out of date. 3.2 was just updated a couple of weeks ago because reasons. There we go with the update. Nice. Now, it remains to be seen if I need more fans. I'll monitor the system with Hardware Info 64 and then make the determination. So I've got plenty of room at the top here for more fans. This is an AM5 system, and you can use an AIO with AM5, but generally I don't think an AIO is necessary for AM5 as long as you get sufficient cooling. And in fact, our Noctua cooler here is probably massive overkill, even for the 9950X, if you're going to overclock it. A good tower cooler is probably all you need. If you were doing an Intel build, then yeah, you probably do want to use a 280mm AIO in the top. I think that makes the most sense economically versus trying to mount an AIO in the front here, because you get the nice RGB fans in the front. The chimney effect, exhaust out the top, it works. Also, the clearance. If you look at the Noctua and you look at how much RAM clearance it actually has a fair bit of RAM clearance. And I've got our other fan, our second fan, sitting directly on top of the RAM. When you put the glass side panel on here, you don't even have 1 millimeter of clearance. There is no clearance at all. The fan is right up against the glass because the fan is offset because of how tall our G.Skill memory is. I think that I might mount this fan at the rear if it was in my way. Technically, the rear is designed for a 120mm fan, but these 140mm Noctua fans have 120mm mounting holes, and so you can make it work back there. You can also 3D print and offset. I did that for the Torrent Compact a long time ago, and something like that would work here. The spacing of the grid at the back here is such that you can use just regular fan mounting screws, and it's sort of a hidden mounting situation, which is a nice, clever feature that Fractal has carried forward on this case design, which I like a lot. Now, let's talk about that fan controller. There was a video I did with Steve, and I sort of mused that onboard RGB controllers should use something standard like a USB serial interface. That is exactly what Fractal has done here. This device shows up as a serial device, and that's important because modern web browsers will allow web pages to connect to serial devices if you give them permission. What that means is that we can have a web-based application that will control your RGB. But more importantly, because it's a serial protocol, anybody could reverse engineer and figure out and build their own interface for this RGB controller. So you don't even necessarily have to use Fractal's web application. And to be sure, these web applications can be downloaded and run locally. You don't have to depend on a website going away or anything like that. You can save the application locally and run it locally from time immemorial. You have to know a little bit about web development and packing things, but Discord is another example of that. Discord is an application that got its roots in a web application that was packaged to run locally. Now, Discord's a little different because Discord definitely has a server component where it has to talk to the server and do stuff. Like the whole point of Discord is communication. But Fractal's application is about controlling your RGB, which means that it'll run just fine forever locally. Or somebody could reverse engineer the protocol and do that. And just like that, proprietary RGB interfaces go away. So just for that alone, I want to support Fractal because that is exactly the direction this industry should go in. And so that this thing just shows up as a normal device that doesn't require any special drivers or anything, operating system or WinRing 0 or any of that. Boom. There you go. Good job, Fractal. And just in case you were wondering, yep, our Optane is correctly detected and we're ready to install the operating system. Well, almost. I need to set my Expo profile and some BIOS settings and then we're good to go. Seems like we're in good shape. Now, what about our GPUs? What does this build look like with the ASRock Tai Chi in there? This is the 9070 XT, which does have the NVIDIA style power connectors. This is a piece of cover plastic. It just snaps on and off. Boom, there you go. There's what it looks like with the Tai Chi. I don't know, what do you think? There's probably a lot of people screaming, okay, the Steel Legend, maybe that fits the white aesthetic a little bit better. But if you're going to run a Founders Edition card, like the 5090, all of a sudden, my choice of a black CPU tower cooler maybe makes a little more sense. So that's the Meshify 3. What about the Meshify 3 XL? That's the same thing, just more XL, right? No, it actually has a ton of features that make it a little more XL. You can see it's not quite, it's a little taller, but it's really just deeper. And I think a little wider. It's the same design philosophy, but there's a lot more features. I mentioned water cooling. You get your pump mount and a drain port on the bottom. And at the top, you've got a lot of options for mounting things. Like the Meshify 3 RGB, the Meshify 3 XL RGB also comes with 3 RGB fans in the front. This is also a 7-slot design. So if you're looking for that, 8-slot design, you'll have to get one of the higher end Fractal cases. It's really just an extra slot hanging off the end of the motherboard. So if you've got a Threadripper motherboard, you can put your GPU in the bottom slot if it's a 2-slot GPU, and it only takes up 1 PCIe slot on your motherboard that way. It's pretty awesome. It has the same RGB fan hub, but look here, 360mm AIO. So you can bring in air from the front and exhaust it directly out the side through a custom loop, 360mm, or side mount 360mm, or whatever it is that you want to build. And there's enough room for a 360mm in the top, or 280mm, or you could get, crazy and go nuts with multiple radiators if you want to. That's just screaming Threadripper, isn't it? Threadripper Xeon Epic Workstation. Let me know what you want to see me build in this. Do you want to see a custom loop, or do you want to see something with an AIO? Don't forget we've got AIO options like this from Silverstone. This is literally designed for socket 4677. High-end machine, high-end building. And something like this would work great in there. So what sort of a build would you like to see with the Meshify 3 XL? I couldn't quite make up my mind. So engage below and let me know. I'm Whittle, this is level 1. This has been a quick look at the Meshify 3 XL and the Meshify 3. You get a lot of really interesting features, especially custom loop, water cooling, XL-sized systems without being overly large. I like the compactness of the Meshify 3. It doesn't have any excessive space. Remember when Fractal cases used to be like 17 feet deep? No wasted space in here. And it's still large enough to hold our giant Tai Chi GPU and get a really nice build out of this. So, yeah. Looks like my Windows virtual machine is almost ready. All right, that'll have to be another video. I'm Witless Level 1, I'm signing out. You can find me in the Level 1 forums. Let me know what you think of this new launch from Fractal. All right, signing out, and I'll see you there.